Welcome to Storytelling with Lindsay Bednar.
Hey,
Hi,
how are you?
I am doing awesome. How are you? It's so good to see you.
So good to see you. Pink is fantastic.
Oh, thanks. This is a birthday gift from Chris.
Perfection.
Well, thanks.
How are we doing?
Great. Um, I feel like I have so much I want to ask you about today because I was like, okay, I have to remember what we covered last time,
Yes.
and so I listened back, and what a fantastic episode that was. And so
Awesome.
for
Mm.
for people listening, if you haven't tuned into episode 22, which was our first one, listen to that as well. Maybe start there and then jump back into this one because
Yeah.
that took you through your like entrepreneurial journey, like all of the seeds that were planted and got you started.
Yeah.
And and then I mean, when we left off, did you have the idea for what you're doing now in your brain? Were you already doing that? I mean, were you
No,
working on it?
no. People ask me all the time, like, did you always want to open a school? And I was like, no, that's completely insane. Like, who would do that? Who would take that on? I think it's just one of those things, Linz, that, I've always been passionate about kids. I've always been passionate about personal development and personal growth, and education, self-education, right? And so it was just kind of this perfect storm of I think we could do this. I think we could do this. I think we could offer, a different option. So it sort of just fell in my lap, to be honest, but definitely not something when we had talked before that I was like, oh, this is what I'm gonna do next,
Right.
I definitely had this feeling though of like, I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years. Yeah, and I love what I do. I'll always continue to create, but I do feel like people are always looking for their life purpose or whatever. And mine has always been teaching, and I've always known that. And not necessarily like teaching as in a school, but just teaching in general.
Mhm.
Um, and so this just kind of my entrepreneurial path was very much on that line, and this feels down that as well. So I knew that something was coming. And I knew that I'm like open to everything, attached to nothing is a mantra that I say to myself all the time, right? So I had done a lot of coaching.
Well, I'm gonna hang
Yeah,
on because
go
I'm
ahead.
literally writing that down.
Yeah, that's a good one, right?
Yeah, I know I've heard it before, but I love it. Open to everything and attached to nothing. I'm
Yeah, I think people have a really clear, like, this is how this is going to happen, and it's going to go one, two, three, and it's going to look exactly like this. And then when it doesn't happen, because it never happens like that, right? Then we feel frustrated or discouraged or whatever. So, with this school project, my mantra for myself, my promise is like, I promise not to panic. Just tell me what to do next. I just keep like, okay, the next step will come and the next thing will unfold. And so I just keep rolling with that.
so amazing. I mean, okay, I want to start with like what were you seeing? Because as a former high school teacher for 12 years,
Mhm.
I can say that I have a myriad of like frustrations with our school system. And let me be clear, I am not speaking about educators themselves. I'm speaking of the
Yes.
system. I mean, I have worked with some phenomenal educators who um, they're like amazing mentors to kids, and thank God for them. The system itself is broken, it's outdated, and
Yeah.
the majority of the teachers with whom I worked would say the same. Um, so I have a lot of things in my head of just like, okay, you know, the the school bell rings at the beginning of the day. The school system was literally set up like an assembly line. It's very counterintuitive to just like being in the flow and going with these and everything that us as adults are learning, right now. So like the actual structure of it, the way in which they're taught to, there's still a lot of rote memorization and just regurgitating things that they've learned. Um, the lack of like critical thinking skills. Those are all things that I saw in education, I see as a parent, huge frustration. So what kinds of things were you just feeling picking up on prior to like, oh, PS, I'm starting a school?
Well, I mean, there's a list. So yes to everything you just said, first of all, but I would drop my son off at school in the pickup line. And I remember pulling into the pickup line of the school and I'd be like, okay, you can do this. It's going to be great. And you're going to have fun. You know what I mean? I'm like giving him a pep talk. And he's like, yeah, mom, sounds good. And this child is like joy is the definition of my older son. He loves everything. And so to see that, I could just see the light getting dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And I was like, oh,
Ugh. I think
so bad.
every parent can relate to that. It
Yes.
hurts my heart.
And you're like pushing him out the door of the car line, like, you got this.
Right.
6 hours. I have no idea what you're going to be doing, but I'm sure it'll be great. There was a lot of that. And I was like, this is not, I'm a big believer in everything is energy, right? And so if you go into a school with that type of energy, there's really not much you're going to learn, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just always saying, like, if you know better, then we have to find a way to do better. And I was like, I think we can do this in a different way that has a more positive energy attached to it, that they're so excited to go to school, that it's something that they look forward to. And now, literally, if they miss a day of school, Linz, they're so mad. They're like, no. Or like in the morning, they're like, come on, mom, we gotta go. We gotta get there. So I was like, okay, if they show up to the school in that state, we can teach you anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. We can teach you anything because you're wide open, right? They're just like excited and energized and pumped up. We can teach you anything. And the opposite is true. And so I just had how many times am I going to drop them off in this line and give them this pep talk before I just choose to do something different? And we had moved from Boulder, Colorado. So just for my own I had done a lot of research on schools, and I happened to live in that area of Boulder where every option of school was available, right? So it's whether it's Montessori or Waldorf or charter schools or public schools or private schools, like there was almost so many options. I was like, whoa. Well, I had read a lot because again, I grew up in a tiny town like you where there was two options. So I was
Right.
like, what are all these things? Did people just make up these schools? Is this actually a thing? So knowing that all of those existed, there are a lot of options available. There just weren't any of those options available here.
Mm,
So I just kind of went off on this learning discovery extravaganza. Like, where do you even start? You know?
right. Right. How
Where do
did
I
you start?
start?
Like
Yes.
literally
So
like how to create a school for dummies. Like I feel like I would be looking
straight
for
up.
like that.
Woof. Okay, well, first of all, Carl and I have this rule. We call it the 3X rule. And we apply it in absolutely everything that we do. So the deal is if you create a project or you have an idea, you just have to go into it knowing it's going to take you 3 times as much time, 3 times as much energy, and 3 times as much money as you think it's going to take.
Mm,
And we apply that to everything because for so long I created things and I was in this constant phase of like frustration and irritation and disappointment, right? Because it wasn't moving fast enough or it was taking too long or it was too expensive or all these things. And so we just had a really long conversation. This was years ago. And he's like, okay, it's always 3X. It's 3X what you think it's going to be. The school is
so
spot on.
accurate.
So I went in like, okay, this is my idea, knowing that I was going to 3X everything, which is pretty much right on the money. But like anything I create, I'm a huge believer in mentorship and coaching. And so the first thing I did is picked up the phone and called one of our Montessori teachers that I loved in Colorado. And I was like, walk me through this process. Like, what do I need to do? What do I need to buy? How does this work? And there was, so it would be 2 summers ago, Lynn's, where I was probably, well, the end of the school year that I decided to do this. And I wanted to open my school in September,
That's
which is
great. You
a
would like
ridiculous,
3 months turnaround or something wild.
ridiculous timeline. I would never recommend that. Now that I talk about my 3X rule, I was apparently breaking my own rules. But So I just went on, I'm a learner, like it is one of my strengths. I'm a researcher, I'm a seeker. And I was like, I think I can figure this out. So I was up until 3 in the morning consistently, day after day after day through the summer. Like, how do you do this? Where do you start? And just read every book I could possibly get my hands on. I interviewed, over 30 teachers in our community. I just went on this explosion of I need to know everything as fast as I possibly can. I looked at different curriculums, different schools, worldwide, nationwide, and kind of just started piecing together like, I like this piece from this school, I like this piece from this school. I like these concepts. I brought a lot of things in that I know as an entrepreneur, right? Like time management and finances and marketing and hiring and delegation and all those things, and just kind of started to mold together this school. And I thought that it was going to be my two kids and maybe a couple of their friends. And the response has been insane. And just the phone calls that I get and the stories that I hear and the waiting list to get into this school is just, it's crazy.
I know that's so incredible that there's a waiting list. I mean, because it opened to
This is our second school year. Yeah.
school year. And okay, so okay, a lot of questions. I mean, and I, this is coming from me who toured the school, got to do,
Yeah.
talk with your kids. And I'm still just trying to like wrap my head around how all of this happened so quickly. But before I ask more questions, it literally speaks to when you are in alignment, when you are not resisting the the nudges that the universe is getting, because we get so in fear, or we'll be in our ego, or like that's not what I had in mind for me, or this is going to be too much, I can't do it, or whatever. But when you ignore all of that and you just are in the flow, like, so amazing. Okay.
There's this guy, Garrett Gunderson, and he talks about this philosophy called the producer's paradigm. And I am obsessed with this. And it talks about the concept of creating something from a state of abundance and joy and service to others,
Mm.
where most people create for cash, right? So I promise, like, you don't open a school to make a bunch of money. There's a lot of ways to make money. This is probably not one of them, right? But I was like, that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing this. I'm creating something from a space of abundance and joy and service to other people. Because when you create to cat for crash, which I've done, right? I've created things to with the sole purpose, the sole intention of making money, and that leads to stress and anxiety, and that's how people get burnt out. But when you're in alignment and when you're consistently downloading, like you and I talk about all the time, there is no such thing as burnout, and there is no such thing as like getting tired. And like I just fell in love with this project, and have just kind of become obsessed with consuming knowledge and information of how can we make this better, what can we do different, how can we adjust it, how can we serve more people. So for me it was really about for what purpose, right? For what purpose and at what cost are you going to go and take on this monstrosity project?
Well, and I mean, doing it in and of itself is so incredible, but then to watch your kids and the changes that they make, which I want to get to too. Um, but I want to back up and talk about, okay, so it's the end of the school year. You're like, I'm going to open a school in the fall, so I have 3 months, and you you dive into it. You said you were up till like 3 a.m. About how many different systems do you feel like you have pulled from to create your own? Like, I mean, it seems like it's
Yeah,
not a copycat of anything. You're like, I'm gonna choose from here for over here, which is
right.
takes a lot of research.
It takes a lot of research. Yeah, because the thing is there's no perfect answer to education, right? And I don't pretend to have any kind of perfect answer. I think the reason it is so tricky is because every child is so different. So what works for one child doesn't work for the next, as you know, right? Same with your kids. It's like
Mhm.
how I parent one of my sons definitely doesn't work for the little one, right? And you're like, wait a minute, this just worked and now it didn't. And so this school thing was the exact same. So I knew some pieces that I loved, right? There was some homeschool, like I said, a lot of Montessori. I like that kind of thing. And then I just kind of identified gaps. Like, how come we were never taught like certain financial education, right? Things about like your credit score or how, or a credit card and interest and how these things work. And I just kept making this list of I wish someone would have taught me this and this and this. And then I looked back at the people that I've coached and mentored as an entrepreneur. And I used to say this all the time. I'm like, gosh, don't you wish someone would have taught you that when you were 9? Oh my gosh, don't you wish someone would have taught you that when you were 9? And then I was like, ah, well, maybe someone should teach them when they're 9. That's a great idea. Right. So all these things that I had to learn, in my 30s and 40s, I was like, wow, how different would my life be had someone had that conversation with me when I was 8.
Mm.
And I just made a list of all of those things, like, for example, time management or grittiness or the ability to finish what you start and do what you say you're going to do. Like that list was really long, Linz. And that's when I was like, okay, feeling a little overwhelmed at this point. But you just take it one day at a time and how do we bring in these messages? Because I think education is so much more than just academics. It's life skills and it's leadership and it's how do I contribute back to my community and how do I be a great friend and how do I represent my family to the best of my abilities and the list goes on and on. So I just kept saying like there's more to it than sitting in a desk doing a math worksheet. Now we need to check all those boxes too, and so we did, but bringing in all the other pieces of it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously you have to align with uh state standards or things that are required to have a school in operation. So well, I can't, I mean, as a English teacher, I had to get very familiar with the standards, and it was a long list just for the grades that I taught.
Mhm.
So um I can't imagine being like, okay, not only am I have to become familiar with the standards of this one, these few grades in this subject, but I need to become familiar with all the standards. Like that is
Yeah,
a for anybody who's not in education, that is a mountain
it's
of
about
standards to look at and to
for sure.
integrate.
Absolutely. So again, I just went back to like, what are my strengths? And one of the things that Carl and I have always been really good at is knowing what our strengths are. And I've always had this rule with myself, like I know what I'm good at, and I spend 80% of my time doing what I'm good at. And anything else I delegate or I dump it. Right. So I was like, all right, I don't have to know everything, right? I think oftentimes people ask the how question. And I started asking myself who instead. So instead of like, how am I going to do that? How am I going to figure out that? How am I going to learn all of that? Now I go, who knows that? Who can we hire? Who can we work with? Who can we partner with that already has this knowledge so that I don't feel like I have to know everything because that's impossible.
Right.
But there is someone who has mastered curriculum development. There is someone who knows everything about the state standard. So who is that person? And I think that switch between how am I going to figure this all out? The how question puts it on me to the who, I just have to find the right person.
Mm.
And they already have all that information.
I love how you articulated that because it's something for sure you figure out as an entrepreneur pretty quickly. Like I can't do all of these things
Oh,
myself. I don't have a desire to, and that's not where my zone of genius is. So then you have to start finding the who. But uh,
yeah.
yeah, I love that shift. And I am anticipate that that's something that you very much integrate with your students in how they approach.
Yeah. Yes. Um, it's the concept of like strengths-based learning, right? Which again is had nothing to do with schools. It's a business strategy that I've always used.
Mhm.
And so I just brought that into the educational piece of it is like, okay, what are you good at? What fires you up? What, I mean, everyone has something, Linz, that they could do for hours and hours, and all of a sudden 6 hours has gone by, and you're like, what just happened? Okay,
Mhm.
well, that's you're in your genius. You're in your, I call it downstream. Like you're going downstream, you're just flowing,
Yeah.
right? And we all know what it feels like to try to paddle upstream. So I'm just like, if we can keep, if I, first of all, can stay in my strength zone, like this is where I can contribute, this is what I'm really good at, and go out and hire people and keep them in their genius, and then we can collaborate as a team. That's how you tackle these big projects. And it was just for this, it's just one step at a time. And we're learning every single day. We screw up daily. We make mistakes, and that's part of the thing. I tell the kids and I tell our staff all the time, we fail fast and often, fail fast and often. And when you fail, we cheer, which really weirds people out sometimes. I'm like, congratulations, that was terrible, right? And then they're like, what? I'm like, yes, but look at how brave you are, and look at you're still alive. Great job. You that quiz was horrible, and you made it. And now let's, and then they start laughing, and I'm like, listen, that's what life is about, is being bold and being brave and going out and trying new things and failing huge and getting up and do it again. Whatever it happens. So they laugh at me like, oh, here we go. We were terrible. She's gonna cheer. Like it's a big joke. But I ask our children on that all the time. I'm like, tell me something that you totally sucked at today.
Yeah.
Great job. That's awesome. Right?
Yeah. It's such a mindset shift because we're taught from in education from early on that mistakes means failure, it means lower grade, it means I didn't get it. And I remember when I was, we might have talked about this in the last one, but I remember when I was in third grade and I was doing very poorly in math. And it was all because I was making these little, sounds super weird. I was making these little like houses out of bubble tape containers during math class. I remember this very specifically.
Of course you were very
Long,
focused.
long story short, I wasn't paying attention and it caught up to me very quickly. And so I had to be pulled to work with para um, outside of class. And, they're trying to get me caught up. They're doing what you can do in education. Like you need a second scoop and we're going to
Mhm.
totally get it. But that energy just told me that like, oh, you're you're not as good as everybody else. And that's why you're doing that. And I swear that set my mindset in math for so many,
Ever.
yeah. To this day, I have insecurity around the financial part of like business and I lean very heavily on business coaches for all things finance related as if I can't do it myself. And I'm a competent person. I know I can, but yeah,
Yes.
it's
And it's very rare that I run across an adult that doesn't tell me a story like that. Like, when I was in seventh grade, this, you know what I mean? Like, it's constant. And I have the same stories of like, I remember walking down the hall in the high school, and you go in the door to the right if you're not good at math, and you go in the door to the left if you're good at math. I went to the right, and all of my friends went to the left, and I will never forget that feeling, right? And, bless my mom who had every tutor, every worksheet, everything that she could possibly do to help me. And I just don't, it doesn't click for me like that. Right? That's not what happened. And I really, the same as you, had this mentality of I'm not very good at school. I'm not very smart. I'm just not very good at this, whatever this was. And that was an energy that this mindset that I created at a very young age. Not very good at spelling. That was one for me. Right. So, and it wasn't until Lynn's I actually went to college. And now, if you go back to when we were graduating high school, right? It wasn't are you going to go to college? It was which college are you going to go to?
yep, 100%.
That was
And
it.
I
So,
don't think that's true necessarily for everybody, but for sure in our circles that we were hanging out with, it wasn't you're not doing anything else than going to college. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So I was like, oh boy, there's more.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do this. So I picked a college. I went to Mankato for 4 years, and I went into sports medicine. So athletic training. So this is like the person on the sidelines of the football field that's like taping ankles and wrapping ice and, assessing injuries. And for the first time in my entire life, I was like, I'm awesome at this and I love it. And I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to go to class. I couldn't wait for the next football game because everything was like, there was no test on a piece of paper. It was like this athlete has a problem and it's my job to solve the problem so they can play in the football game. And it was like a game. It became this like I could solve problems and I could fix things and I could use all the tools and I'm using my hands as fast as I can and think on your feet. And I was so into it. And all of a sudden one day I was like, oh, I think I'm good at school. I remember calling my mom like, don't tell anyone, but I actually think I'm doing really well. And she was like, "Oh, thank you. I can't even imagine, right?" Um, but it was interesting because as I graduated after 4 years, I was kind of like, "Well, now what do you do?" So I remember getting an athletic training job and I was not making very much money and my schedule was horrible and it just was not. And I remember thinking back to myself of, okay, well, all the successful people that I know in my life that we grew up with, right, that are doctors and dentists and all these things, and they just went to school longer than I did. So I'm not feeling very successful yet. So I must need to go to school longer and get more letters behind my name. And that's how you become successful. And so that's what I did. I went back to grad school. I got a master's of education, which is kind of a joke because I never thought that I would ever use that. I had no idea why I was getting that. I just was like, I don't know, you just have to go for something, so pick one. And that's what I did. And funny enough, how life becomes full circle, and that's actually become kind of useful for me at this point.
I have the biggest grin on my face because it's literally why I got my master's too. Like I got my master's of education in December, knowing that I was going to leave teaching that spring. Like not knowing, but like having a having a gut feeling like, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna. And basically, you get your master's of education when you're teaching so that you can be bumped up in the higher brackets of pay. Otherwise, you're going to stay at a, pretty low salary for
Right.
your career. And so that was initially why I got it. But then I knew, and it was to me, it was also because my dad had his doctorate. Both my sisters have their doctorate. And I was like, I'm not going to be the only one in the family who has my bachelor's. So I better step up my game.
It's like how success has been defined for us.
Yeah.
And then we have a tendency to follow that path, which is really interesting. Now, I took a left turn and went down the entrepreneurial path and for 20 years and now have come back to this educational concept, but it is kind of this mix of both worlds, right? Of education and entrepreneurialism. So it's right up my alley.
Yeah. It's amazing how the road just kind of as windy as it can be gets you back to like exactly where
Yes,
your gifts and your alignment.
right? Attached to nothing, open to everything.
Yeah.
Mhm.
One of the things I know you and I talked about when I visited the school is how you saw learning styles change, or when you had students who you kind of had to break some of those patterns that are reinforced at a traditional school. So share that.
Yeah, so I picked up very quickly that children have been taught, Lynn's, what to think, not how to think. So, and I this is one of the things that in working with adults, there is, I know it sounds funny, but there are a lot of adults who struggle with how to think, like how to go about a process and how to manage my calendar and right because they've been told what to think for their whole life. And so the traditional school system is it actually works perfectly for how they would like it to work, for how it's designed. And they they really like the routine, and they're taught routine, and they this is the assignment. You turn it in by this date, and this bell rings and you stand up and you move over here, and you can eat during this time, and you go to the bathroom during this time. Like everything is very intentionally drawn out for them. So what happens is when you're in that, no, there's a lot of benefits to that, but when you're in that system for a long time, you don't have to necessarily think for yourself. And so what I started to notice is when kids transitioned into our school and are put in a position where, you do have to think, it's very fascinating to watch. Some of them get very frustrated. Some of them are completely paralyzed and they just stand there and stare at you. Some of them look to go copycat from their best friend and just like, yeah, whatever she said, that's great. There's a lot of that. And so it's a transition and you have to have a lot of patience. And sometimes it can take, the longer that a child has been in that system, the longer the transition takes. So, for example, if you bring in a 5-year-old that's never been to a traditional school into Lake Academy, their transition is very easy and they're catching on very quickly, and it's just becomes who they are. Versus if we bring in someone who is in a 7th grader, that transition takes a lot longer, because they're forced to think for themselves, which is not super comfy for some of them, but definitely an epic skill set for sure. So I think learning how to think when no one tells you. So what does that mean? Like on a daily basis, people ask me this all the time. So you might say, well, Brooke, what time is lunch? And I'll say, well, where do you think you could find that information? And then I just sit there and stare at them. Because what they're used to is a bell rings and tells them, hey, Lindsay, it's time for lunch, right? So you don't have to think through the process. So everyone that comes to the school has a watch, and then there's a schedule that's posted, and your job is to match your watch up with the schedule that's posted. So easily I could tell you what time lunch is at, but I'm trying to teach you how to use your resources and think for yourself. So you need to look at your watch, look at the calendar, match them up. Now, why don't you tell me when lunch is? So that's just one example. Or they'll be like, hey, Brooke, I have to go to the bathroom. Cool. Right? Like, and it's like that funny. Like, I'm like, nice.
Yeah.
It
Love
now,
that.
but again, they've been trained to ask to go to the bathroom, or there's only certain times in which you're able to do that. So that's just an example, right? But this happens 100 times a day. So one of the things that we've implemented as a school is, for the most part, right? There's always exceptions, but for the most part, we answer questions with questions. So if you ask me a question, yeah, what time can we go outside? Or what are we supposed to do for this science project? It's a great question. Where do you think you could find that information? Or who have you asked? Right? And we have this process, where if you have a question, you first have to use your brain, novel, right? And actually slow down and think through the process. If that doesn't work, then you use a resource or a book, right? Brain and then book. So you use a book, use a resource. Did you look it up? Did you Google it? Did you look at some type of resource? Third is you use a buddy. So if you can't think about it yourself and you can't find a resource, then you can ask a friend, because odds are they might have already figured it out, or that might be their strength and you could lean on them a little bit. And if all of that doesn't work, then you can ask a teacher, or what we call a guide. But what children do initially is, I don't know the answer to this, so they go ask an adult. I don't know how to do this. They go ask an adult. So we'll go back through it. Well, did you use your brain? Did you think through the process? Did you use a resource? Did you ask a friend? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, great. Now let's have a conversation about how we could work through this. And 95% of the questions are completely taken care of before they get to an adult. So it is incredible what children are capable of, oftentimes if we just get out of the way.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, the the amount of disempowerment that so many of us adults do, and I'm not just throwing teachers under the bus. It's like I can be very quick to do this myself. You know,
Same.
my kid asks a question and it's just like a quick, easy thing for me to answer. Um, but yeah, just those daily practices and shifting for to put the onus on them so they figure it out
Mhm.
is huge.
Well, and I always say this journey is as much for parents as it is kids.
Mhm.
Right? And so these are things that we train parents on. For example, like how are you going to respond when your son forgets his lunch? Because it's going to happen. So let's just talk about it now. So your options are you could drop everything that you're doing and run home and get their lunch and bring it to the school. Option two is you could run to the grocery store and just get them something because that's actually quicker and drop it off at the school. Or option three is like, huh, that's unfortunate. I wonder how you're going to figure that out. And you also have to be prepared for the backlash, right? Like, but I'm starving and then all comes the drama llama stuff comes out. And you have to be prepared for that. And sometimes it's not the kids who struggle with being uncomfortable, it's the parents who struggle with watching their kids be uncomfortable.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I was just at a hockey tournament this weekend. I know you were there too. The number of moms that I saw walking out of the arena carrying sticks and backpacks and bags and sweating, right? While their kids like do walking out with nothing in their hand, like they're just having the best day ever. And I'm like, this is the problem right here. You play the sport, you carry the bag. You can't carry two sticks. You probably should only bring one, right? So it's this situation where it's a mom thing. I'll just tell you, but like, and I say that because I've done it, right?
Yep, same.
Allowing them to struggle, allowing them to forget their lunch, allowing them to be uncomfortable. I promise you, they're gonna be okay.
Mhm.
And so I underestimated the amount of conversations and trainings that we would have to do with parents. I really was focused on here's what we're going to do with the kids, when in fact, 90% of the questions, concerns, problems that we've had are actually parent problems. Only 10% of the problems are kid problems. Kids are like, we're good, we're great. I borrowed some food from my buddy. It's actually not a big deal. Whereas the mom has now shut down her entire day because her son forgot peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? So it's interesting to see, and we do that from a place of love. We do it because we care so much.
Sure.
Um, but I think we underestimate how disempowering that is to them.
Oh yeah, I know that logically and I've talked about this before too, but that kind of um mothering it just enables, and
Mm.
disempowers kids. And I've been totally guilty of it. Gary is definitely the one who got Garrison to like carry his hockey bag and do all that because I just would, I would just do it when he was younger and not think about it. And then obviously they get to a certain age and it's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
you obviously can do this now. But yeah, and I think you know, uh, it comes from parents and especially us mothers that, like you said, want to protect our kids. And we take for granted how much opportunity we're taking away from them by protecting. Like we're not protecting them, we're disempowering, we're enabling, like, and yeah, everybody's probably been guilty of it before, but when you remember that they're actually super capable and they can be really innovative with coming up with solutions.
Mhm.
Yeah,
They
then
they come up with stuff that I would have not thought of in 100 years. And the best part is when they do that, they're so proud of themselves.
I'm
They're
sure.
like, amazing. Did you just see what I did? That was unbelievable. And then they're willing to take on the next thing and the next thing. And confidence is a muscle that you build daily, right? And all these tiny wins, tiny wins, tiny wins. Over time, they just create these very resilient, very confident children. But it's you can see the moms get all cringy, like, oh, here comes the girl that makes her 6-year-old carry his hockey bag. And I was like, yeah, that's me. And he loves it. He's like, I got this. Like he's the little baby Hulk, right? But it's uncomfortable. And sometimes we really have to dig into like, is it because the child's uncomfortable? Is it because I'm uncomfortable? Is it because I'm worried about what other people think about how I'm parenting my son? There's a lot that goes into that. For parents, but I see this a lot. It's a lot of conversations that we have.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's a very natural instinct to want to just protect your kids, and so it's just constantly reminding ourselves like, is that protection or is that enabling or what am I doing here? And yeah, one of the things that we were just when we were talking about um how you've how kids kind of have to be um introduced to a different way of school. One of the one of the things you pointed out when I visited was collaborating and how they had such a like discomfort with collaboration.
So interesting. So this came when we had a few middle schoolers come in because I didn't really recognize it at first. And so there would be 2 or 3 kids sitting right next to each other, working on the exact same assignment, uh, doing the exact same thing, and they will not talk to each other. And I'm like, what is going on? Why why aren't we like helping each other? Well, because they've been taught that that's cheating. And they've been taught that, using a buddy, using a resource. Listen, I'm like the queen of Chat GPT. I'm like the hey Siri, how do you spell this? How do you do this? Carl, what's this? I mean, Carl can do math problems, calculus in his head for fun, right? So I'm constantly like, what's this? What's this number? How does this work? So it's just part of who I am. So I was shocked at the whole like don't look at my piece of paper, don't talk to your friends. So they have been trained that you need to know all the answers yourself without talking to anyone else or using any resources. And so I literally would have these conversations like, so you realize you're all working on the same thing, right? And you realize you're all sitting next to each other. So how would it feel if we opened up this conversation and we could all work on this together? And they were very reluctant, actually. And as you bring in a new child into that environment, and now they're in this environment where everyone's used to collaborating, you can see the new kid looking around like, are we going to get in trouble for this? Is this what we're supposed to be doing? I don't think this is what we're supposed to be doing. So they'll take their laptop and they'll hook it up and they'll put it up on a big screen TV, and then they'll all talk through the assignment together. And, it might be like, you excel in science, and in that conversation you become the leader, and I kind of take a back seat because I'm learning. But then when it comes to math, that's where I excel. So now I become the leader in the conversation and you take a back seat. And then we go outside and this person becomes the leader. So what you're seeing is the leadership. They have figured out on their own who's good at what and who takes the lead where. And that person naturally becomes the mentor. Because one of the conversations we have all the time is if you can do it yourself, congratulations, but you haven't mastered a skill set until you can effectively teach it to one of your friends. And this constant mentorship, which again is just built into me as an entrepreneur, that you see that all the time now in the school. And now they're like, why would you do that by yourself? Number one, it's not very fun. And number two, it's just not very effective, right? So then you go back to, well, Brooke, how did you create the school? It doesn't even come into my awareness to take on this project by myself. What I look at is who can help? Who can I collaborate with? What resources can we gain? And exactly what I've done to create the school, because I didn't do it by myself, I did it with a team of people, is exactly what these children are doing when it comes to a science project that we were working on this morning. Same skill sets, life skills.
I mean, it's just it's so cool. It's so hard to like hear about what
I know.
everybody's doing there and then just knowing that is not what my kids are doing.
Well,
Like,
yeah, and listen, I'm the very first one to say Lake Academy is not for every child. I
mhm.
don't think there is a one size fits all. And actually, I would it would be my first red flag if someone is like, I have the ultimate answer to education. I'd be like, let me let me ask you some questions, right? So it's about the individual child, what's best for them, what their family values are. what their strengths are, what their interests are, and then finding a system that works for them. So there is a lot of children, Linz, that are very successful in a traditional school model. And then there's a lot of children that are very successful in a Montessori model or in a Waldorf model or in a charter school model. So they all work. I'm just here to say one model doesn't work for every child. So let's give some options.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have been awesome for me for sure. I feel like you and I were very similar students, and not coincidentally, we became entrepreneurs because it was like
Mhm.
I knew too, as when I was younger, I didn't like I didn't like to color in between the lines. I mean, not figuratively. I did not
Right.
literally. I liked
Yeah.
color. But but yeah, I wanted to do things differently, and I didn't. That was one of my biggest frustrations about teaching. You know, a lot of people say, "Oh, teachers have so much flexibility." I'm like, actually, no, it was so structured. And then, you know, just from your day to day and what you do, uh, how the day is structured, but then also like flexibility of being able to leave school and see your kids' stuff. And so that, um, yeah, so that never felt like, even though I loved teaching, the structure of it never felt right, both as a student and as a teacher.
Yeah, you're exactly right. There are so many just brilliant people that are educators and are so passionate about this, and I have so much respect for that. And some you just start to notice these patterns, right? Of like, for example, I have this concept like there's just children that slide and smile through the system. And I have a few of those that have come into our school recently, and they have been so focused on the result, not the behavior. And I talk about this all the time. So we work on cheering for the behavior of learning, not the result of a test score. So it's actually irrelevant to me what you get on a test. What I want to know is, do you understand? Do you comprehend what we're doing? Do you know how that could relate to your life? How you might be able to use that tomorrow? How you might be able to teach it to someone else? So, and I notice as people transition from traditional school into Lake Academy, that's definitely something that they've been trained. Like, I got an A. I'm like, right. And you can't tell me one thing that you just learned. So it doesn't matter. Right. But in that system, because there's a lot of people, and you can only do what you can do, right? It's that if you just smile and you do okay and you don't cause any problems, you just continue to slide through grade after grade after grade after grade. And sometimes these kids have gone through the entire school career, and they don't really have an understanding. They haven't really grasped, like, what am I learning and how is that affecting my life and how can it make my community better? But they got A's. I'm like, oh boy. Well, so when they come into Lake Academy and I'm like, listen, I appreciate your smile and I would love for you to contribute to this conversation, right? So you do have to take a stand in our conversations, and you do have to provide evidence for why you think the way that you think and why you voted this way. And, so a lot of those things are just life skills, and I could go on and on of the learning that they're receiving, but things off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, you can't hide in your program, right? I mean, because there's so much personal accountability, and I think that's one of the things that's missing in a traditional education too, is because there's a lot that, just from the ease of like checking your grades constantly and having those updated in the system, and then it shows if you have a missing assignment, whatever, which, listen, from a parent's perspective, those things can be great, I'm sure.
Necessary, yeah.
Yeah. But yes, for a student, there's just, it removes a lot of that, personal responsibility and accountability on them to figure out, okay, what do I need to do? What haven't I done? What's missing? What's, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's personal accountability and willingness, right? And so just because education is so much more than just a test score or an academic piece of it. And I know people are like, yeah, yeah, and they hear that, but I'm like, we're missing the character building, the communication skills are at the top of my list, right? Learning how to write and how to public speak and how to shake someone's hand and look them in the eye and say, "Hi, Lindsay, it's nice to see you today. I'm so glad that you're here." Just that makes so many people cringy. They're like, texting, I'm just going to text you, "Hi, Lindsay." That would be easier for me, right? So to put these children in a position where not only do they have to say that to their peers, they say that to other adults, to other parents, to other people that come into the school. They learn how to greet people, right? So I'm huge on the ability to communicate at a high level. Things like coping skills, Linz, like how do you deal with stress? Emotional discipline of when to make decisions and when to not. So if you're in this, "I'm feeling really tired and really emotional," probably not the best state to make some big decisions in, right? And so I've seen so many adults that they just don't have those skills, right? They can't communicate, or they make decisions in really yucky energy states, and then they're trying to make up for that. So I was like, okay, could we teach them that when they're 10? Can we teach them time management and personal accountability and, like I said, just emotional discipline? And it's not going to be, there's nothing that's going to be perfect, and we work on it every single day. But how different would my life be had I started working on those skills when I was 10?
Mhm. Yeah. And I feel like there was another thing that you do, which is really cool, holding each other accountable with the students. It's like they have a kind of a conversation of, I don't know if it's not a, I don't want to say disciplinary, but I think you know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
We have it's called a contract. It's called our school contract. And this would be the rules of the school. And it's on a giant poster board. Because again, I was creating businesses. I always noticed that I always used to say, you can't hold people accountable to expectations that have never been set. And employers do this all the time. It's like, "Well, she should have known that that wasn't acceptable." Well, how would she know that? Is it posted somewhere? Do you talk about it? Like, no, you just have these rules in your mind. And then you're mad when your employees don't follow the rules that you didn't share with them. You know what I mean? It's like, so now you're holding people accountable to expectations that they didn't know that they had, which is very confusing. So I'm always like, okay, let's be very clear on what the expectations are. So, number one, this contract was created by the children. So, this is a list of rules or standards that they have created for themselves. So, this might be things like, I clean up after myself. I promise to clean up after myself. I promise to complete my work to the best of my ability on a daily basis. I promise to speak with respect and kindness. These are just some things, examples, right? And so if you are new in the school on your first day of school, this is in a giant poster. It's like the first thing that you see when you walk in. We would say, "Okay, Linz, so let's walk you through the school contract." And we would read out loud to you every single bullet point. And then we would say, and this is all the kids are doing this, right? So they would say, "Okay, Linz, is there anything that you don't understand about what we just read?" You'd say, "No, I got it." Or, "I have a question about this one." Okay, great. We'd answer all your questions. "Is there anything that you disagree with that we just read?" "Nope, I got it." "Is there anything that you want to add? Maybe you think we missed something that you want to add to the list?" "Nope, I think I'm good." "Okay, we are going to ask you to publicly sign this contract in front of everyone. And when you do that, that means that you are aware of our expectations and you agree with them, and you're in alignment with the rules of the school."
Yeah, you get their buy-in right away.
Totally. And there again, this is not the set of rules that Brook provided. This is rules that they've created for themselves. So now if you come into their community and you start breaking their rules, they have no problem holding you accountable. So this has nothing to do with me. I just kind of stand there and like watch it happen. So they publicly sign the contract. And then if the contract is not followed or the contract is broken, then some of the kids and myself will have a conversation with you and say, "Okay, Linz, do you remember that you said you were going to follow our contract? Are you clear about what it says? Do you understand that what you just did was not in alignment with our contract?" And you'd be like, "Yeah, okay, great. So listen, we fail fast and often. It happens. People make mistakes. You're like, I'm sorry, I got this. I'm going to do better. And we move on. It's really not a big deal. This is a huge lesson in how to hold people accountable, right? And how to give feedback in an honest and kind way for us. For you, it's a lesson in how to receive feedback. So many adults think of this. Can adults give feedback? Can they take feedback or do they get super defensive? Do they get really emotional? I didn't do that. I didn't do. No, listen, you did. You did. And it's fine because we've all messed up. It's not a big deal. And we're going to move on. Right. And then if it happens again, that child goes home for the day and they can have a conversation with their parents and they can write a letter to all the kids in the studio in the school and come back the next day and they can read that letter with their parents in front of everyone and talk to us about I understood the rules. I understood what I did was not in alignment with our contract. I apologize. Here's my plan to move forward and be better next time. And that's everything is like public. So the accountability is real.
Hi.
Right? Like sometimes I walk through that and people are like, ah, that's that. I mean, mostly it's the parents, like, oh, that's super cringy. And I'm like, yeah, intentionally. But there is never a child that will go through that school that is like, I didn't know the rules. I wasn't aware. I didn't understand what I was, supposed to do. No, no, you knew exactly what you're supposed to do. Therefore, you chose not to do it. And that's okay. But there are consequences for those choices. And I think as people get older, some of these generations that we're learning about, they really struggle with consequences for their actions. And there are consequences, and we hold people accountable to those decisions.
Yeah, and I think it might sound scary to like go stand in front of everybody with your parents and like, apologize, whatever. And it probably is somewhat, but because of the environment you've created, I imagine it is so much more.
Yes. It's very much an energy of like, listen, we get it, and people make mistakes. And this is not the last mistake you'll make in your life. And look at it, you made it. You're still alive. You're doing
Yeah,
fine. It's all good. And then we leave it there. We leave it in that moment. And it doesn't come back around like 6 months ago, you didn't do this and you didn't, da, 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 da. I'm like, no, no, no. This conversation happens. And then we put it in a box and we put it on the shelf and we leave it there. And we love you and we move forward. And that's how that works. Because again, if you fast forward to adults, how many of adults say that, right? Like, well, 3 years ago, you were not very nice to me. And so, I'm like, no, no.
yeah,
We have the conversation in the most honest and kind way we possibly can, while still with like holding the values of the school. And then we let it go and we move on. It's no problem.
yeah. That has to create such a safe environment for everybody to make mistakes because, like you said, they're going to.
For sure,
Yeah.
for sure. And usually again, the kids are pretty good at this. They're like, "Sounds good. What are we doing next?"
Yeah.
They don't, and it's the parents that are like, "Ah," freaking out. I'm like, "Listen, it's good. We're good. We're having a great day. We're moving on. We're way past that." So it's good to see kids just rebound so fast and they're so flexible and um they don't carry things. They just kind of let it go.
Right. Not like we do.
Right, exactly.
Um, so talk about what a typical day looks like because I think obviously we all have an idea of how a school day
Yeah.
is supposed to operate or has traditionally operated, I should say.
Mhm.
So yeah, what does that look like?
So first of all, the campus itself is like 30 acres. It's gorgeous. It's woods and trails.
Gorgeous.
Gorgeous. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's very calm. It's very quiet intentionally. These kids spend a tremendous amount of time outside, regardless of the season. And I think a lot of that plays into mental health and just being attached to nature and going out into the sunshine and breathing fresh air. There's so much that goes into that. So when they first arrive, they do have an open space where, you'll see some kids skating on the rink, you'll see some kids in the art studio creating something epic, you'll see puzzles, you'll see scooters, just free, right? To get all their wiggles out and like Start to prepare yourself. I was like, it's a pregame warm up, right? You don't just go into the game. There's like a whole routine for high level athletes that they go through before they get to their game. And that's what this is. This is like the pregame space. And so there's no bell that rings. There's no, someone that's like, hey, we're starting. There's none of that. It's just when it becomes time, so 8:30 or whatever, we'll sit down and we start to launch. And we call this like our launch of the day. Like think of a rocket launching. And this is where we have some of the conversations of personal growth. So, for example, we might have conversations about we might talk about accountability and what does accountability mean. We might talk about having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. We might talk about, how you're going to really focus on building your self-confidence today. And these are the types of conversations that we'll have to start our morning and really set them both mentally and energetically to launch into the rest of the day.
Okay, before you go on, so it starts at 8:30, so everybody's responsible for just getting their self
Uh-huh.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're like,
That
well, what
concept.
happens? Novel, right? Because then what happens is these kids go to college and like they all miss their classes. Maybe that
Wait,
was just like, I
no,
was
I
like,
did.
nobody called me.
And P.S. I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. Brooke, I literally will tell Garrison, I don't know how many times every morning it's time to do this, it's time to do that. Like, I'm so guilty of that.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
so there's kids that miss the launch because they're not paying attention. And that's unfortunate for them.
Yeah.
And then it's just, you don't have to like go ask a buddy or go find a resource and like, okay, what did I miss? Because I wasn't in the right spot. I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. Listen, it happens. So where could you look to make sure that you know you're on track for the rest of the day? Oh, there's a posted schedule. Totally novel. There is a posted schedule and you have a watch or there's clocks everywhere. So let's make the connection between the schedule and your watch and keep yourself on track.
Mm.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Moving on, right? So then they go into what we call core skills. So this is going to be your math, your science, your language, right? Whatever it is that they're studying. So once a week, every child has a goal setting meeting with their mentor or their guide, their teacher, right? And if you and I were going to sit down for your goal setting, I would say, okay, Lindsay, so let's review your last week. Tell me how it went. So I did a lot of research lens on reflection. I'm big on reflection. I've always been big on journaling, on looking back like, okay, what mistakes did I make? How am I going to be better? But I always did it from a business perspective. So what I learned is that 33% of learning happens in the state of reflection. But because we're Americans and we're like, what's next? What's next? What's next? And we're always in a hurry to do the next thing, we actually don't ever reflect. And so we lose
33%, did you say?
33%.
Wow.
I know, right? So it's like if I would just slow down and go back and say, okay, what did I do that went really well? Okay, let's do that again. What did I do that was terrible? Let's never do that again. What did I say to this person? Okay, that wasn't the right thing to say. So here's what I'm going to say next time. This is how we can mentor ourselves. But we don't do that because we're just in a hurry to do the next thing to make the next dollar to get to the next appointment. So what we do with these children is we sit down each week and we reflect on their previous week. So, how did you do with your core skills? Where did you struggle? What went really well? What was easy for you? Okay, are you on track with the standards? Are you keeping up to the pace? Do you need more work? Do you need less work? Do you need some support somewhere? Like we look at all of that. Then we ask questions like, well, how do you think your effort was? Did you give it everything you had? Were you messing around? Were you talking? Were you distracted? You're wandering around? Okay, great. So, what are you going to do next time to make sure that that doesn't happen? And that child leaves that meeting with a goal sheet that literally says Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It's got checklists. This is what you're going to do in English. This is what you're going to do in science. This is what you're going to do in reading, right? So then when it comes to core skills, they go grab whatever materials or whatever other people they're working with, computer, whatever. They know exactly what to do because they have a goal sheet. So during core skills, it's probably a 3 hour chunk of time. You'll see them all doing different things. This group will be working on a science project. this person is, reading X amount of pages in their book. They're all doing different things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They're all on their own path, depending on what they need to work on. So that's the core skills piece. And then from the back end, we are just tracking them, making sure like, okay, they're on pace, they're hitting all the standards that they need to hit. And this is where a lot of my research came in, as far as like, what are we using for reading? What are we using for math? What tools, what materials, who's going to teach what? That's where a lot of the research on my part came in. So that's core skills. Um, from there, they have at least an hour for a lunch or to go outside. Now, here's the thing, if core skills lens was 3 hours long and you were super focused and you were on top of it and you were working to the best ability that you have to get through your core skills, and it only took you 2 hours, not three, well, congratulations, you've just earned yourself an hour of freedom.
Mm.
So now, what are you going to do with that time? Do you want to do some art? Do you want to go on a hike? Do you want to go skate on the rink? Do you want to just get a cozy blanket and dive into a book that you're just like super into? So, like all humans, these children are motivated by freedom. And so there's never this like, sit down, do your work, get it done. There isn't any of that because they're motivated by the opportunity to have freedom of choice with what they want to do with their time.
Mm.
So if you finish in 2 hours, nice. You get to do whatever. I'm so excited to see what you want to come up with, right? And they're snowshoeing today. They were just doing epic stuff. So now the opposite is true. So if you mess around and you're distracted and you're not doing what you're supposed to be, and at the end of core skills lens, you haven't checked everything off your list, well, congratulations, you get to just keep working. That's fantastic for you. And instead of going outside on a hike and instead of reading with a cozy book or going into the art studio, you actually just get to continue with your core skills. So it's all about you decide how you want to spend your time. And but here's the deal: this is what you're accountable for, um, and they get it done. It's pretty funny.
I mean, I think that my fear of just because I can totally be a pushover, I think that my fear in your shoes when I would have first started would have been like, well, what if nobody listens? And what if it's just like chaos? Like, did you have any
Oh,
of those?
listen, this kind of stuff wakes me up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Still, I'm like, what if no one learns anything? What if, you know what I mean? Like I have all of these things. What if everyone hates it? But that's just, you just have to control your emotions. So I have to coach myself on the same thing that I coach these kids on. So
Mhm.
that's a story that I created in my mind. That's not the reality of the situation. And it's just trust the process, right? Like they want to, I just believe that humans want to do good. They want to achieve. They want to
Yeah.
do a good job, whether that's an employee or an entrepreneur or a little child at school. So it's my job to give them the expectations and tell them this is what you're responsible for. And then they're intrinsically motivated. I don't motivate them with candy and I don't motivate them with all these other things. I'm like, no, you're motivated because you've earned the right to make your own decisions.
Mm.
And they love that.
Yeah.
So, not to say that there aren't days where there's kids rolling on the floor and they're wrestling and they're, causing chaos and doing all the things that they're supposed to be doing. But what happens, Linz, is so this just happened 2 days ago. It was like there was one kid that was super messing around and everyone else is focused. And they're like, listen, you need to get your stuff done. You need to go in a different space so that you can focus because you're on my team at recess. And if you don't get to come outside, now my team is not going to be very good because you're stuck in here doing your work because you're not focused. And the kid was like, oh, yeah, okay, got it. So, like, the peer accountability comes into place. I don't say a word. Half the time I just sit there and I'm like, whoa, I can't believe that just happened.
Oh,
Like, it's working. This is wild. And you really see their personalities come out. Like some people are really into rules and you can't break the rule and don't color outside the lines, and we have some of those. And then we've got some like free spirited, do whatever you want to do, right? So it's like a personality contest going on all the time. It's fascinating to watch.
yeah.
But moral of the story is they have a very clear plan. They know exactly what they're supposed to do. They have to make the decision if they're going to do it or not. So that's the core skills piece. Let's see what else. They go outside. This isn't like eat as fast as you can in 15 minutes. This is they have full access to a kitchen, which they love, by the way. You'll see them making homemade pizzas. You'll see them making paninis. They're making mac and cheese. They're using the oven, the stove. They're making banana bread, right? They're learning these skills in their lunchtime, and then they're outside and doing whatever they're doing. So that's if you want to hang out for lunch and eat for an hour, that sounds great. If you want to eat in 10 minutes so you can go outside, that's great. If you want to go eat in a tree, that's great too. You just never really know what you're going to find. Let's see. Okay, then they come back in. We do a thing that is reading. We call it deer, drop everything and read. And they can read whatever they want. So I remember in school reading these books that I did not like, and I did not want to read them. And I didn't have any interest in what they were talking about. And I think that actually affected my love for reading, because one of my keys to success is I never stop reading. I'm constantly reading books and resources, and that's how this whole thing came about. And so I was like, okay, what could they read that would allow them to fall in love with reading? And the answer is whatever they're into. So you'll see kids reading novels, you'll see kids reading hockey magazine, you'll see kids reading comic books, you'll see kids that have headphones on and they're holding Hatchet and the audiobook is reading Hatchet to them while they're looking at the words. Perfect. Sounds great. Whatever you want to do. That's actually how I read, with an audiobook while I'm looking at the book at the same time. So it's just however you want to fall in love with reading. One little girl's obsessed with her Kindle and she carries it everywhere she goes because that's how she loves to read. So we do that. Is this helping? There's a lot going on here.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I know people are probably just as fascinated as I am right now of just
I'm like, is this? If not, we can move on. But it's
no, no, no. Keep yes, especially because I I just know that education is for sure changing, and uh, you literally are a huge part in the creating the new world in the way that education is going to look. Like I have no doubts about that. And so I want people to hear what a day in the life of one of your students looks like, because I firmly believe this is where we're headed. And I'm so excited about it.
I'm so excited about it. Yeah, and it's just reprogramming ourselves of what we think school should look like. When you close your eyes and you think school, you think kids sitting in a desk with a teacher at the front and they're doing worksheets, right? Like this because we experienced it. But I'm just here to tell you it doesn't have to look like that. Now it can, and that's great. But there are other options too. So when they come back, Lynn's from lunch, and they're done reading, then we do what we call like our project-based learning, hands-on learning. So this is where I'm like so obsessed. And I think sometimes, I didn't know this, but when people hear hands-on learning, project-based learning, they're like, oh, cute, you colored a poster. I'm like, no, no, no. You have to watch these children because they're amazing. Like your mind would be blown. So every few weeks we change projects or we change quests, hands-on projects. So let me just give you a few examples, because what we don't have is like an hour of science, the bell rings. An hour of math, the bell rings. An hour of English, the bell rings. Like that's not a thing. So now you're given this 3 hour chunk of time and you have this project. So I'll just tell you one that we just did, which was so fun. We had our own Shark Tank. So the show.
We literally watch it all the time. Love
Love
it.
this show.
Yeah.
Love this show. And I love everything about this. So the kids were in groups of whatever, 3 or 4. And it was literally like, your job is to create your own business. And there were these different aspects of the business that we went through. So, for example, they had to figure out, number one, what business they're going to create. Okay, so it had to be a service or a product to be a legit business. And so one of them they were called Super Scrubbers Automotive. And they were going to create an automotive detailing company. And so what they had to do is go research. I'm like, well, I can get my car detailed at like 4 places around town. Like, why would I come to yours? So they had to go and research all those other places and like, what services do they offer? How much does it cost? What are we gonna offer instead? Why would someone choose us instead of them? And then we're gonna create a logo, and this is where the graphic design comes in. How are you gonna market your business? Where are you going to promote it? Who's your ideal customer, right? They're going through all this. Now you have to create a P&L for your business. So how much does it cost you to detail a car? How much is the employment? How many people are you going to hire? You guys, these are 10-year-olds that are figuring this out, right? Now you're going to put this all together in a beautiful package. They were so cute. They had like t-shirts that said Super Scrubbers Automotive, and they had to put together this presentation. And in front of all their parents and grandparents and people in the community, we brought in 3 sharks from the community, and they had to present their business like they were on Shark Tank.
Oh my,
Um, so one of the groups did Super Scrubbers Automotive. One of them did, okay, this is so brilliant. They called it rink ears, like hockey rink ears. And they took a gator. You know what a gator is, like the thing that you put like when you're gonna go snowmobiling, you put it
oh
on your
yeah.
ear, the mask thing.
Yep.
So they took that, and their whole concept was like, we skate on the outdoor rinks all the time and our ears are always freezing. And that's why we have to go inside, not because we don't want to play hockey anymore, but because our ears are frozen. So we're going to create a solution to that called rink ears. So they took these gators and they figured out how to sew, which none of them know how to sew, and your mom can't sew it for you. Those are the rules. They took hand warmers, like, the kinds that you would put in your mittens, and they sewed little pockets in their gaiters and they put the hand warmers in their gaiter, and then figured out how to make it small enough so they could still fit their hockey helmet on. Because they were like, well, you can wear a hat, but then your hockey helmet doesn't fit and it hurts your ears and it's just not very fun. So we'd actually rather be cold. So they created this whole product, and they had a prototype that they made called Rink Ears. And this was the name of their company.
No way. That is insane.
It was insane. And I was like, can I invest in your company? Because I actually legit think that's a really
Yeah.
good idea.
Yeah. For
Right?
real.
And so now their running joke is like, oh, we should have rink gears. It's freezing outside right now. But from the ground up, they've created this entire thing. And they had to put together a pitch, a presentation. They had to have all like a slideshow that showed their prices. They had posters. They had, and then the sharks asked them questions like, why did you do this? Or how's the logo? Or how much does it cost? Or what's your profitability point on, making a rink ears? Where are you going to sell this product? And how many of them do you need to sell to make X amount of dollars? So this is hands-on learning. It is not congratulations, you colored a poster, which is what I think a lot of people think it is.
Mhm.
This is like you're doing art, you're doing math, you're doing research, you're collaborating, you're presenting, you're communicating, you're doing science, you're doing all of these things in one thing that we just call a project. And then you present it like, here's what we've created. And you should see the look on their face. They were like, I can't believe we just pulled this off. And then the judges would ask them questions like, well, did you guys always agree? And they're like, no, we were arguing and so is messing around, not doing what they're supposed to do, but they have to figure out how to collaborate with each other and get this project done, right? And you don't just get to work with your best friends. You have to learn how to work with everybody and people that think like you do and don't think like you do. And so there's so much that goes into that, but it's a real life project. And that's just an example of one of them that we've done. Every 6 weeks or so, we switch projects. And every year they're different. So, that's just been one of my favorite that we've done recently. But they'll spend 2 to 3 hours in the afternoon on this project. So that's what they do instead of a science class. But
Yeah.
they do tons and tons of science,
How fun. Yeah, I mean, just that one alone, I'm thinking of how many different standards that could
right?
fulfill. It's
Yeah,
wild.
it's wild. It's wild. And that was my job, is like, how do I take this project idea that I have and make sure that it checks all the boxes? Because we can produce a transcript like any other school,
Mm.
right? The standardized testing, all of that, like any of those. So if your child transitioned from our school into a public school, it's very simple. I just produce a transcript like anyone else. So from the back end, I had to make sure that we're meeting all those standards and things, which we do. And they love it, Lindsay. They're so excited. I mean, I wish you could just feel the energy in the space. Like they're laughing and they're yelling at each other, and there's like cardboard and glue sticks, and like, I mean, the whole place is just trashed because they're just having the best time ever, and they're just giggles everywhere. So again, everything is energy. And if we can keep them in that energetic state, they're going to remember that when they're 20, right? They're going to look back and go like, "Oh my gosh, do you remember when we made rink ears and that was so fun?" and da 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 da, all these things. Like they're going to remember that. And I'm like, that means they learned something, and that means they internalized it, which is just so epic. Isn't that so epic?
So
Everyone, that the adults are like, I want to do
I
it.
know, I know. I remember when you were posted
So
about
fun.
hosting you were doing summer camp.
Oh yeah, so
And I
fun.
was like, can I sign up? Because this sounds
I
amazing.
know. I know. It is amazing. I know that was another thing that was just the summer camp. I had no, that was not even in my awareness, but someone in the community reached out to me and they're like, "You should have summer camps." I was like, "That's a great idea. We're going to do
Yeah,
that." And then we
yeah,
just,
throw that on the
yep.
list.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you? Let's see, what else? Just in closing, like they do all studio maintenance. So there is no janitor. Your mama is not here to clean up after you, right?
Mm,
So you make a mess, you clean it up. So they have teams of people, and each team has an area that they're responsible for in the school, and they clean the entire school. And they're very into it and they're very proud. And if someone doesn't do what they're supposed to do, it is known very quickly. So they call that studio maintenance. They do that every single day. This is things from like washing all the towels in the wash machine. So they're learning how to do laundry, which it's amazing how many children don't know how to do laundry. They're learning how to wash dishes. They learn how to load a dishwasher. They learn how to mop a floor. They learn how to sweep. Lots of kids don't know how to sweep, right? To when you dust, you start at the top and you work your way to the bottom. So again, yes, we're cleaning the school, but what are all the things that we're learning while we're cleaning the school? So that's a big one.
yeah.
And then we do a thing called closing circle, which is all about reflection. So we literally sit in a circle at the end of the day and we go around and you say, "My favorite part of the day was," and then you tell us in detail what your favorite part of the day was. My sticky part of the day, the point of the day in which I was most challenged is, and you throw that out there. And then we do what's called a character call out. So oftentimes, I always think of like you create what you look for. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I talked to them about, if you look for things that are wrong, you will find things that are wrong. If you look for things that are awesome, you will find things that are awesome. And so we train this into them every day. So what we do is character callouts, and it'll sound something like this. I saw Lindsay take a 10 extra minutes out of her day and come and help me with the math that I was really struggling with. And I call that epic mentorship. Or I saw Sam help Sarah, who fell down outside. He went inside and got her a band-aid and helped her clean up her knee. And I call that being responsible. So not only are they looking for someone that is doing something awesome, they're calling it out publicly and then they're putting a word to it. So I call that mentorship. I call that leadership. I call that responsible. I call that accountable. I call that patient. So they're learning all of these words and seeking to find them in their classmates. So it's amazing because oftentimes you'll see two kids get in a little disagreement throughout the day, and they'll come full circle at the end of the day and they'll actually do a character call out for each other. Like, I'd like to call out Lindsay because I know her and I weren't really getting along during Quest today, but we figured it out and we hung in there, and I call that friendship.
Cute.
So good.
Oh my
And
gosh.
we're done. And then they go back outside. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean,
So that was a very long explanation of our day, but I think there are so many things that are going on within this school that are intangible. There are things that you can't necessarily measure. They're really hard to describe on a website. Um, but I get comments now, Lindsay, like if I'm go out in the community, someone will say, "Oh, did this child join the school?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, how did you know that?" They're like, "I can tell."
oh wow.
Wow. Mm. For the first time ever in their life, they looked me in the eye when they were speaking to me. For the first time ever, this child, when I asked them a question, they didn't give me a one-word answer, but instead they actually explained why they had a good day at school today. So that is the highest level of compliment, is when people are like, wow, I can tell so and so has been going to Lake Academy because they're so different. And I'm like, that's so interesting because they've been here for like 3 weeks, you know?
Oh.
So pretty amazing. And the comments that we're getting from the parents are like, I've never seen my son want to go to school before. I've never seen him excited to wake up in the morning.
Mm.
Pretty cool.
Wow.
Pretty neat.
Yeah, now you're gonna make me cry.
I know, I know, but it's just as like, come
Oh.
on, the 8-year-old me would have been so into this. Like, this is the school that the 8-year-old me would have wanted to go to.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, I'm so proud of you. I'm so excited for you. It's just so amazing, honey.
It's
Uh,
pretty.
yeah.
And
And just
I think it's a legacy project, Linz, right? Like, so I was telling Carl, I was like, you know what? If I died tomorrow, this would be something that I'm just so proud of because I don't think we will see the fruits of our labor for in our lifetime. But I think that the children that grow up like this and they learn how to think and they learn how to connect and they learn how to lead, um, these are the children that will impact our communities. These are the children that will become the next teachers. They will become, the next community leaders, the next business owners, the next entrepreneurs, the next doctor, whatever it is. And that's when we'll have made an impact.
Mhm. Yeah, I am just I'm blown away by what you're doing. I mean, I visited with the students myself, and I will say the amount of engagement and their ease of just talking to an adult, having asking questions, making eye contact, just very natural confidence that you have created. And like we've talked about on the previous podcast, you said you believe that confidence can be taught and that it can be built in. And yeah, you're absolutely doing that for them.
Very true. And again, how incredible to learn that confidence when you're 8.
Hmm. Hmm. When
And just imagine if some,
most of us adults, are still working at it.
yeah, for sure, for sure. In fact, one of the ways in which, so my oldest son Maverick and I are, he wanted to work on a project, and he keeps talking about podcast. And so I was like, well, I have a friend who does podcasts, I've known her forever. And so we listened to several of your podcasts, and he was like, that's cool. Let's do that. And I was like, okay, well, what do you want to talk about? And what do you want to call it? So him and I basically created our own project-based learning on the side of creating this podcast. So he calls it Maverick and Mom. It's super original.
But
It's so cute. And then we did a whole bunch of research on, so are there other podcasts like this? Are there other podcasts led by children? Are there, right? So we did all that. And then we figured out, like, what's our goal? Like, why are we doing this? For what purpose is the question that I asked him, right? Because it's not because we just need another thing to do. Because I'll be honest, I was like, okay, okay, fine, okay, we can do this. I got this. But first and foremost, learning how to communicate at a high level, right? So that was the number one thing at our list, is for him and for me to practice our communication skills. The other thing was to learn a new skill together. So oftentimes I think kids feel like their parents have all the answers. I've never done a podcast. And so he's like, well, Mom, how do we do this? How do we do this? I was like, I don't know. Let's figure that out. I don't know. Where would we look that up? I don't know. Who would we ask? So it's good for him to see me in a space of learning something new, of being uncomfortable, of not having all the answers. Like, dude, this is my first podcast too, buddy. I'm not sure. We're going to figure this out together. So we're looking at that. Leading by example, seeking mentorship. Like, one of the first things we did is I was like, let's call Lindsay. Let's ask her what her advice for us would be. So I was talking to him about, in any project that I create, one of the first things that I do is seek mentorship, seek people who have gone before you and what can you learn, because oftentimes that can speed up your learning curve by years sometimes.
For
So
sure.
she's probably learned a lot that she could share with us in 10 minutes. That might save us 6 months, right?
Right.
So we talked a lot about that. Learning how to find our resources. He was like, well, what kind of microphone do you use? I was like, I don't know. Let's look it up. So we're looking up microphones and we're looking up lighting and how do we record it and how do we edit it, right? There's so much that goes into this. Um, and I'm a big on, if you say you're going to do something, then you do it. So, just integrity with your word. And I've, again, had so many business experiences with adults that don't do what they say they're going to do. And so I was like, all right, you say you're going to do a podcast, we're doing it. And there was about 16 times where he was like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And there was about 300 times where I was like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. But just sticking it out and finishing what you said you were going to do, that has been huge learning. But I think the one lens that really has stood out is he was all in the whole time until the day before we were going to publish the first episode. And so I showed it to him. I was like, okay, it's ready and it's edited and we're ready to hit publish. And he was like, I was just thinking maybe we shouldn't do this anymore. Like, I'm not really that into it. I think I'm too busy. Oh, yeah, we spiraled real quick down the like. I mean, people might think this is really stupid. They're probably gonna wonder why we're doing this. This gonna listen and think we're weird. I mean, he like went there, and it was so good because our biggest lesson is just putting yourself out there, not worrying about what anyone else thinks,
Mhm.
and just going for it, right? And so it was so fun to see him like process through all of those things. Um, Now we're like a couple episodes in, so it's and the point is not how many people listen to the podcast because I actually don't care. The point is that we're learning all of these lessons, and he's learning at age 9 to put yourself out there regardless of what other people think and to finish what you started and do what you said you're going to do. And so we just created this little podcast project on the side called Maverick and Mom.
It's so amazing. And the first episode, I reached out to you, but we
Yeah.
listened to it in the car and get on the way to a hockey tournament. And yeah, the discussion of confidence was like so impactful going into like a high pressure situation where he was going to,
Mm-hmm.
in a tournament, whatever. And yeah, I could just see things clicking, and it gives us just talking points to talk about, like when we're in the car. Like it's such a brilliant idea, not just for what he's learning, what you're learning, what you're doing together, but also just to, like, I think if I were to just ask some of these questions sometimes, he would maybe be a little bored of it. But like hearing Mav talk about it and process it
Mm-hmm.
made Garrison more like apt to be like, okay, yeah, so here's when I feel more confident. I mean, it just, yeah, it just opens a door for more
And
conversation.
they're super short and sweet because again, you're dealing with kids, so it was like these are like 15 minutes long. They're very short topics. But going back to reflection, so the one that he was talking about is hockey trials, like that was a big reflection for him. Like, what did I actually learn, and what would I do different next time, and what did I do when I got super uncomfortable, and why one day was I playing awesome and the next day I was terrible. Like, he just had so much learning from his reflection as we were going through that. So I was like, if nothing else comes out of this, that was great.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
so awesome. I mean, the things he's practicing took me to my late 30s. So
I'm still working on it.
yeah, I mean, well, right. I just started working on it in my late 30s. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, there and I think, the podcast just kind of goes along with the themes of the school, right? And the
yeah,
things that we're learning. So
yeah.
it was he pulled that out one day, like, let's have a podcast. And I was like, okay, okay. We're
Got it.
gonna we're gonna
Yeah.
slide that in. Where are we gonna slide that in? I'm not sure. But we're making it work.
So cool. Okay, so I've got to ask because I'm sure other people are going to be wondering this as well. Are there ideas for expansion in with your school in different locations outside of what? what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, again, so there's two sides to this school thing, right? Is like the academic side and then there's the facility side. So not only was I learning like curriculums and standards and teachers and students and all those things, I'm also learning zoning and ADA and compliance and all these things like facility type of stuff. So we're working on that and whether it's the county, the city, the state to figure that out in our own location. And so we've gone through that process and we're able to expand our current campus pretty substantially in the future. But again, I started Lake Academy not to make it's never going to be this big huge place. That was never my vision. It's just it's this like boutique school that offers a lot of individual attention and it's more about the right families coming in that believe in what we're doing and believe in our vision. So I don't have a number like we need to have this many kids, we need to have this many kids, because again I'm working from the producer's paradigm of just service and joy and down. So I've like right now there's a waiting list because I had no idea of the people that would want to come in. But we have been able to expand the number of kids that we have on our current campus, and we'll continue to do that. So that's the first piece. Then once what I've done is work to systemize everything that we're doing. So in in the space of reflection, I'm constantly writing down this worked, this didn't, this worked, this didn't. And it's oddly very similar to my entrepreneurial career of like create one location and then all of a sudden there's 300 locations. So I'm seeing a lot of that being mirrored back to me. Um, and I'm just in this space of like, I promise not to panic. Just tell me what to do next.
Right.
Uh, and I'm open to all of it. So we're exploring all of those options of expansion, and I get a lot of requests for, I wish I had a Lake Academy by me, and I live here, and do you have one of those here? And so I see that as a opportunity to make some impact.
Yeah.
Um, on top of things like this, just having the conversations, whether it be podcasts or books or just having those conversations and allowing people to see that there are other options. So whether it's a physical school location or listening to a podcast or reading a book that they otherwise wouldn't have read, all of those will just keep us moving in that direction, I think.
Yeah, and if people don't have the opportunity for a school that is, different from the traditional model right now, so much of what we discussed is also can be applied to just great parenting and things that you can do within the home.
So true. All of it, actually.
Yeah,
You know, the independence, the confidence, the accountability, the standards, they actually all start at home. And if you don't have those at home and you had them at school, that actually doesn't make sense. So to bridge the two, but I always say there's no one that'll love your kids more than you, and there's no one that can teach them better than you. And, so that can all happen at home, regardless of where your kids go to school.
yeah, yeah. So, okay, next time my kids forget something, I'm gonna be like, I'm sorry to hear that. I trust you're gonna figure that out.
Yes, I know, I know. I'm excited to see how you fix that.
Yeah.
I know. I have to have these like coined phrases so I don't get stuck.
Right, right. And one of the things that I've gotten very comfortable with early on, because I have some great friends and mentors who are fantastic parents, when just, but it is to say, if they have a problem, like, that sounds really tough, like validate, understand, and then like, I'm confident you are going to figure this out. Like, what are you thinking? And then just ask questions, like not solving our kids' problems, just
Because
trusting
often
them.
people don't need you to agree with them, they need you to hear them, right? And I learned that a long time ago. It's like if you can just ask enough questions, one of mine is tell me more about that.
Mm.
That's 5 words. I always say to parents, there's a magic 5 words. Just tell me more about that. So it's like I'm feeling so stressed. Oh, tell me more about that. Or I don't feel very good today. My tummy's feeling sick. Huh, tell me more about that. right? And oftentimes I was taught a long time ago that the answer to the question you're seeking is usually three questions deep. So, there's a superficial question that's generally a yes or no question. Then if you can get yourself to ask three questions, that's generally where the answer lies. And so, for example, like if my son is like, "Oh, I'm not feeling very good. My tummy's feeling very crazy today." I'm like, "Gosh, tell me more about that. Why do you think that's happening?" "Well, I didn't sleep very good last night." "God, why didn't you sleep very good last night? That's weird." "Well, I was really nervous about X, Y, and Z." "Oh, you're really nervous about that. Well, what do you think you're nervous about?" "Well, what if I don't make the team? What if I don't play well? What if we don't win?" "Oh, okay, so what if you don't make the team?" "Well, what can you control there? What do you think what can you be in control of so that these are the things we can work on?" But it's about having the patience and setting aside the time to actually go three questions deep, right? Versus my tummy's not feeling good. "You'll be fine. Let's go." It's like we gotta go, which I'm so guilty of doing that. Be like, "You're fine." No,
Uh-huh.
no, let's actually walk through this. And what he comes to find out is like he's not actually physically sick. He's mentally causing his tummy to feel funny because he's nervous about something. Well, did you know that nervous and excited are actually the same chemical in your body? Right? So if you're having that butterflies in your stomach feeling, you could say, "I'm so nervous," or you could say, "I'm so excited." And what happens when you say, "I'm so excited"? You dominate. You're just like pumped up. What happens when you say, "I'm nervous"? I hesitate. I don't feel very well, and I don't have very much fun. Great. So which one of those things would you like? "I'd like to be excited." Okay, great. And then they roll down that. But it's for me, it's patience and taking the time to stop what we're doing and walk through the conversation so that he can put together, "I'm actually causing my stomach to not feel well, and I'm going to consciously choose a different thought to feel awesome and have fun because I control my thoughts and my feelings and my actions." And it's, I'm like, there's no way a 6-year-old would figure that out, but I'm telling
I
you,
was just gonna say, without the three questions deep, you would never, they would have
never get there.
put that. Yeah.
I mean, have you ever done that where you're like, "You're good, let's go."
Oh yeah. 100%.
I'll be like, "Mom, my tummy don't feel it." I'm like, "That sucks. Let's go." Right? Like,
I know. Maybe you
I'm
shouldn't have
so guilty.
eaten so much
Uh,
sugar last night.
yeah, like
Time to go to
that's
school.
because you ate such and such from the arena. That's your fault. Well, okay, that's not actually helpful.
I'm definitely guilty of that.
That's
Yeah.
so funny. So I've learned so much about, taking the time to walk through and okay, yeah, you want your children to have emotional discipline, but how are you going to go about teaching that? And FYI, you can't teach that to them unless I teach it to myself.
Mhm.
So, what am I doing to create emotional discipline in myself so that I can therefore model that for them and have the skill sets to walk them through the questions so that they can put those pieces together so that when they're 43 and their stomach hurts, they can go, "Oh gosh, I wonder what I'm thinking. I'm going to choose a different thought."
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, love that. Three questions deep.
Mhm.
Mm. So many good nuggets. Oh my gosh.
I'm
Um,
impatient.
I can't believe we've already been talking an hour and 42 minutes. I've taken so much of your time, but literally, I mean,
Classic for you and
obviously, yeah,
I. Okay, can I just leave you with this because this story involves you? Um, so when I first started, I was like, okay, what am I going to call this school? And I was thinking back and I was like, okay, well, what kind of feelings, going back to energy is everything, right? So what kind of feelings do I want kids to have when they think about this school? So I was like, okay, well, when are some of my most happy times? When
Mm.
I have like the best feelings. And so I was like, the lake. I love the lake. And the first thing that popped in my head was Lindsay and I riding on a jet ski, singing Fugees at the top of our lungs.
Killing me
Hottest
softly.
day in the world. The sunshine is out. We're just like living our absolute best life. And I was like, lake. It's called Lake Academy. And because, which stands for leadership, adventure, knowledge, and empowerment, right? But it's all about when I think back of my childhood and my favorite things and my favorite feelings, they came from the lake. And I hope that when these kids look back and they think about their favorite feelings, their favorite place where they felt safe, where they had fun, where they learned so much, they think of lake.
Mm. Brilliant. I didn't know that backstory, and I love that memory with you. It is such a strong memory for me too. Like we must have our frequency must have been like on steroids at that moment because it
Mhm.
sticks out for me so much too.
Yeah. So if you see me whipping down the lake on my jet ski singing at the top of my lungs, I'm trying to recreate those vibes for myself.
We'll
Like,
pick me up this summer and we'll do it together.
yeah, totally. So funny.
Oh, honey, thank you so much. I am just in awe of you always. This is such an amazing thing that you've done. Um, yeah, sorry.
Mm.
I'm so proud of you, and I think about your dad, um, and how much he's got to be just
I know.
looking down on you, thinking like, oh, that's my girl, just kicking ass.
I think I said the other day, so on our hockey rink at the school, I'm like, some girls go on fancy vacations and some girls buy shoes, and I bought a Zamboni.
Yeah.
And I think my dad's dream of all dreams would have been to drive the Zamboni around the school, watch the children play, but I couldn't stop laughing. I was like,
Oh,
I,
so cool. Do you have one for your outdoor rink?
oh yeah, like
Oh,
an actual real life Zamboni.
oh my
Like, I
gosh, how
want to drive
fun.
a Zamboni, that kind of
Yeah,
thing. Yeah. No, it's real. And I was like, what, who would have thought? It was hilarious.
so good.
Like, it could be in Maui, but we have a Zamboni.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay, so everything will be in the show notes, but you know, where for people on the road or not looking at it right now, where can they connect with you?
Yeah, so brookkirwin.com is my website. You can go there, or the school website is lakeacademy.school. You can go there. It's got all kinds of information. That'll also connect you to the school's social media where it's really fun to follow. I'm constantly posting, reels and things about philosophy, and you can see the kids doing the projects, and it's like being at the school. So, yeah, our social media, like Academy GR. You can find us on Facebook or the websites too.
Mm, amazing. I already have a teaser for this episode because it's going to release Tuesday already. But from video clips of when I visited you, so I can't wait to release that.
So fun.
Yeah, I love you dearly. Could not be happier for you. Proud of you. And thank you so much. Can't wait for people to tune into this.
Tons of love. I'll see you soon.
Okay.